lawsuit.
And
vehicles were used, you can either describe it as behavior management or punishment.
An investigation into how some foster kids in Washington were forced to sleep in cars or on the floor.
It seems there was an unwritten code in some offices that this is how we're going to treat kids who do not cooperate.
I think it is absolutely appalling.
Plus, Oregon lawmakers just passed millions of dollars to help resettle Afghan refugees.
We do believe that we have a moral responsibility to help the people who put their lives on the line in Afghanistan for us.
Here's the story.
We told you yesterday's special session in Salem was jam-packed. That funding item was crammed into all the bills that were passed yesterday, so we'll walk through it. It's really interesting. I'm Maggie Vespa. Welcome to The Story, the show where, if you're not familiar, your questions and your comments drive our coverage. So contact info is at the bottom of your screen. Email thestory@kgw.com. Use the hashtag TheStoryKGW. Our team is watching for your feedback as we speak. And I think that we have to start the show, like we have to do this, right? Talking about the thing that everyone's been talking about online, or at least they were this morning, and that's the snow. Look at it. Massive piles of powder covering the streets. People had to use like shovels and snow blowers and tractors and wait a minute. Wait, okay, I'm being told by my producer, we don't think that's Portland. Yeah, sorry, that is actually video from a recent blizzard in Minnesota. Okay, so let's go to Portland. There it is. That makes more sense. That is the snow from Portland. Terrifying, isn't it? Some parts of the West Hills and west side of the metro area got a light dusting overnight. And then other parts of the city, just kind of looked like that. So, for the sake of everyone with front-wheel drive, let's hope it stays this way this winter, because frankly, if we got anything close to what Minnesota got, it would be utter chaos. I think we all know that. Let's get started. All right, our big story tonight, Portland City Commissioner Jo Ann Hardesty is suing the very city she helps lead, along with the police union, that union's former president, and a police officer. And this lawsuit, seeking $5 million, stems from a leak of information last spring that wrongly identified Hardesty as the driver in a hit and run. Turns out it wasn't her. And as Hardesty claims, that leak was no mistake. Here's Kyle Laboshi.
City Commissioner Jo Ann Hardesty is the first black woman to ever serve on Portland City Council and an outspoken critic of police, which made her a target for many officers and the police union, according to her lawyer. And Monday, she fired back with a $5 million lawsuit against the city, the police union, its former president, and a police officer who allegedly leaked information last spring that incorrectly identified Hardesty as the suspect in a hit-and-run crash. The leaks of information were made because of race and in retaliation, wrote Hardesty's lawyer. The suit details a controversy that started to unravel nearly 9 months ago. On March 3rd, a white woman called non-emergency dispatch to report that her car had been rear-ended hours earlier.
Do you have a license plate number?
I don't.
Okay, all right.
I know who hit me.
Do you know their name?
Yes.
Okay.
She is, this is where it gets bizarre. It was a city commissioner. It was Jo Ann Hardesty.
The claim turned out to be wrong. Police determined it wasn't Hardesty. The suspect was someone else. But by that time, less than 24 hours later, the information had been leaked to the news and published. Hardesty's lawyer claimed the leaks were made by a police officer, Carrie Ottoman, and the former union president, Brian Hunsaker, with actual malice, because they were done with either knowledge that the statements were false or with reckless disregard of whether the statements were false or not. Hardesty is seeking millions of dollars in damages for emotional distress and a bruised reputation. Additionally, she's seeking $1 in damages from the city, along with a declaration that the city of Portland violated her rights.
Is it common for a sitting public official to sue the city that she's helping to lead?
Willamette University law professor Laura Appelman suggests the biggest legal hurdle in this case involves something called qualified immunity, which protects public officials individually from lawsuits for violating the legal rights of citizens.
This is going to come down to whether this lawsuit can get around qualified immunity for police officers. And let me start out by saying that is extraordinarily difficult. So it doesn't really matter in what sense how much she's asking for, because getting through the threshold issues of can she actually bring this case to court? So sure, why not make it $5 million?
Hardesty's lawyers declined to comment, as did the defendants named in the lawsuit.
Okay, let's bring in Kyle Aboshi now with details about another story involving Commissioner Hardesty. And Kyle, this time she's being sued in a separate, unrelated case, right?
Yeah, it appears Commissioner Hardesty is being sued for unpaid credit card bills. She owes more than $16,000. Bank of America filed a pair of lawsuits against Hardesty in late November, claiming she failed or refused to pay. We asked her about this, and here's what she said. When I ran for city council in 2018, like many working people, I was reliant on a credit card and built up debt. I live alone without help and put all of myself into my work at the city. Sometimes that means I neglect to take care of personal matters. I tried to work out a payment plan before with this debt that didn't work out and intend to pay this off.
Okay, gotcha. Well, obviously, you know, she's a public figure. So there is greater scrutiny. But at the end of the day, can you talk about a little bit more about why this matters? Like, a lot of people have credit card debt.
Exactly. And lawsuits like this are actually pretty common, especially those involving credit card debt. This is noteworthy, though, for a couple of reasons. First, as a public official, she's responsible for managing billions of dollars in taxpayer money and helping allocate budgets, which presents an interesting question. Shouldn't Hardesty be able to manage her own finances? She makes more than $127,000 a year. We checked with other city commissioners. They don't appear to have creditors chasing them down. Also, she's currently running for her second term. Already, campaign records show Hardesty has raised more than $100,000, half of which comes from public financing. Again, there's trust in managing taxpayer money. So there are good reasons to ask these type of questions. And as you heard, she did respond.
All right. Kyle Aboshi, we appreciate the questions and the responses. Thank you. Let's talk now about yesterday's big special session on rent assistance. And when we went on the air last night, lawmakers were still weighing some items. So here's a recap of what they ended up passing. In short, everything they were considering got the stamp of approval. Renters waiting for assistance now have a longer safe harbor. If you apply for aid before the end of June 2022, you are protected from eviction until October 1st, 2022. Lawmakers also passed a huge funding package with $215 million for rent relief, and that includes $100 million for a landlord compensation fund. They allocated $100 million for drought relief for farmers and agricultural workers who lost wages to severe weather like the heat wave, and $25 million to help local law enforcement agencies stop illegal cannabis operations. Then there was a smaller, lesser-known funding item kind of squeezed in there. The Oregon State Legislature also set aside $18 million to help resettle refugees from Afghanistan. And it got us wondering, why $18 million? Well, back in September, this is why we wondered it, we reported the state of Oregon was anticipating the arrival of 180 Afghan refugees. $18 million for 180 refugees works out to about $100,000 per person. So we asked, again, why that figure? Well, here's the update. In short, Representative Confam says the number of Afghan refugees in Oregon that we're taking in and we plan to take in as a state has gone way up. And keep in mind while you listen to her, Pham is the daughter of refugees herself. Her parents came here after the Vietnam War.
Oregon has accepted about 2% of the national pool of refugees, which given 60,000 refugees on U.S. military bases, we're expecting for this federal fiscal year about 1,200 Afghan refugees to be resettled. And so we took those numbers and we took those needs and went to our resettlement providers as well as legal service providers to figure out what it would really take to provide critical assistance, at least in this first year. And we do believe that we have a moral responsibility to help the people who put their lives on the line in Afghanistan for us. And so we're really excited that Oregon has now upped its expectations, and we are, as I was mentioning, expecting, again, 2% or about 1,200 refugees over the next federal fiscal year.
So from $180 to $1,200. And the money, that $18 million, will go to about half a dozen Oregon agencies with contracts to help refugees resettle here. And one of them is Lutheran Community Services Northwest. So we asked the regional director what they'll spend that $18 million on.
If I could just look at this list: short-term food and shelter, case management services, and the legal services as well, because these evacuees, Afghan evacuees, unfortunately come to the country just paroled into the country. It means legally they have entered the country, but they have no legal status. And for them, the process of applying for political asylum or other means would be incredibly a long process that may take several months to a year or so.
So we've got much more on yesterday's special session at kgw.com. All right, let's get now to an investigation into how some foster children in Washington are being treated. Our sister station in Seattle found state social workers were ordered to punish foster kids by forcing them to sleep in cars and on floors in office buildings. That prompted a months-long investigation from a state watchdog. Here's Chris Ingalls.
A state social worker pulled into this parking lot in Seattle on what seemed like a pointless mission. Her job was to place the foster kid in the back seat into Spruce Street for the night, a nonprofit for children in crisis. But the youth would not go in.
And then there was a standoff, if you will.
Patrick Dowd, ombuds for the Department of Children, Youth and Families, DCYF, says the uncooperative kids spent the night in the car.
Vehicles were used, you can either describe it as behavior management or punishment.
In this report, the social worker told the ombuds she had 5 to 10 car stays where she would stay in the vehicle parking lot all night and take the child back to the DCYF office in the morning.
What kind of things are we talking about exactly? What would the workers do to try to alter the kids' behavior?
Reports of workers turning up the air conditioning on a cold evening or rolling down windows, not allowing the child to play music in the car not having pillows or blankets.
And say, this is your only option. We're going to make it uncomfortable for you so that you agree to this placement.
We're violating a boundary. We're taking away things that are necessities for all humans.
Why are we doing this? Their life's already hard enough.
These former social workers are among 25 DCYF staff we interviewed for a story in May that sparked the Ombuds investigation.
Well, our review was very consistent with your own report that King 5 did. And we confirmed that there are instances where children were spending the night in vehicles.
In addition to car stays, DCYF also housed kids overnight in its office buildings as punishment, typically when they refused to stay at a licensed foster home or facility. The ombuds found youth often have valid reasons for refusing placement.
Where they didn't feel safe, or being taken to a placement that was well outside of their school district and their community.
It seems there was an unwritten code in some offices that this is how we're going to treat kids who do not cooperate.
Yeah, I think it is absolutely appalling that they would ever treat children that way.
State Representative Michelle Caldier is not only a licensed foster parent, she's also a former foster child who says DCYF should take action following the Ombuds report.
I was concerned that perhaps some of the leadership within the agency did not necessarily believe your investigation. That was my concern. I don't know if that was true or not, but the fact that the Ombudsman's office has confirmed this, it sends things down a different pathway.
Social workers told us that supervisors ordered office and car stays, mostly for hard-to-place teens. Part of that is a lack of resources for mental and behavioral health, but it's also a management problem that needs to be addressed, according to Representative Caldier.
I think in the areas, in the regions where they're having the most issues, it is a significant management issue. And they need to work internally to, quite honestly, in my opinion, get rid of the people who are causing the problems.
In a statement, DCYF said, "We have provided very clear direction to our field staff. Having children sleep in cars is not an accepted practice and was never condoned practice or policy for our agency. DCYF won't say if any employees face discipline. We cannot comment on internal personnel matters."
Listen, you're holding up all of us officers.
The Ombuds says most of the office and car stays involve a revolving door of a small number of teens, about 70. DCYF has added intensive case staffing on that small subset of youth to try to find them stable homes.
We need to do everything we can to fix that and focus on what is in the best interest of the kids.
That was Drew Ingles reporting. Still ahead, cancer is becoming more common among firefighters, and it has to do with what's inside our homes.
The products that are being made nowadays are made with things that are killing us quicker.
When the story continues. Welcome back, guys. Keep sending in those questions and comments to the story at kgw.com or use the hashtag #TheStoryKGW on Twitter. When you think of a firefighter who's died in the line of duty, you probably think of someone who died when they were in the middle of fighting a fire. But research shows one of the biggest dangers facing firefighters is cancer. And that danger is growing because of how we build our homes and what we put inside them. Right now, you might have seen this headline. Portland Fire and Rescue is mourning the death of Lieutenant Jerry Richardson. He served 22 years as a Portland firefighter before he was diagnosed with mesothelioma. That's an extremely aggressive and deadly form of cancer caused by breathing in asbestos fibers. And it's one of the most common types of cancer to affect firefighters. Also, firefighters are diagnosed far more often than others. Now, the research is fairly recent, and we talked about it with Portland Fire and Rescue. They say they have to protect themselves from the carcinogens in the air when a building is burning.
It's a big danger, and part of the problem is that we have things now that are made with petroleum products, and when they burn, those chemicals are what's killing us. So, you know, it used to be that a couch would burn and it would be wood and natural fibers, and it wasn't so bad. You breathe those chemicals, those are really bad for you. So the products that are being made nowadays are made with things that are killing us quicker. And that's just the nature of technology and the way things are built these days.
So Portland firefighters have new headgear and safety procedures to try and keep the chemicals out. But for some firefighters, like Lieutenant Richardson, who had been on the job for decades, the damage may already have been done. And that's the case for veteran firefighters across the country. In Forest Grove earlier this fall, Captain Rick Ilg died from brain cancer, and his death is also considered a death in the line of duty because of exposure to carcinogens in burning buildings. Captain Ilg had been fighting fires for 15 years. He was only 49 years old when he died. And according to data from the International Association of Firefighters, cancer caused 66% of the career firefighter line of duty deaths from 2002 to 2019. Heart disease caused 18% of the deaths during that time. And on top of that, according to the CDC, firefighters have a 9% higher risk of being diagnosed with cancer and a 14% higher risk of dying from cancer than the general U.S. population. Now, firefighters and their families are eligible for workers' compensation in Oregon if they're diagnosed with certain cancers associated with fighting fires. As for Lieutenant Richardson, he leaves behind a wife and 2 kids, and a firefighting family obviously mourning his death.
Jerry was a selfless person. He was somebody who cared about others before himself. He brought people together. Jerry was the ultimate family guy. And when I say family, I'm not talking about just his family, which was number one, but his fire family. He touched us all. His battle was inspirational.
And our condolences to his family. When the story continues, we're going to go back in time with a survivor of the 1948 Vanport flood.
It was totally destroyed in all about 1 hour or less, and completely destroyed.
Welcome back. Some of you may be familiar with the history of Vanport, and if not, it's important to keep that story alive. It was Oregon's second largest city back during World War II in what's now the Delta Park area of Portland. That is, until a massive flood wiped out that city in 1948, killing 17 people and displacing thousands. Now, it turns out Portland State University got its start in Vanport when it was known as the Vanport Extension Center. So today, PSU officially opened the new Vanport building at its downtown campus. It's dedicated to the former city's history and its diversity. A significant number of Black Oregonians lived there due to racist redlining policies. So today, we spoke with a survivor of the Vanport flood at that new building's grand opening.
My family moved here in 1944. My father came up to work in the shipyard. And so we lived there. We're from Birmingham, Alabama originally. Vanport was a total city. There was schools, hospital, 24-hour daycare centers, fire departments, recreation centers, everything to provide for citizens. And people lived there until the day of the flood, May 30th, 1948. It was totally destroyed in all about 1 hour or less, and completely destroyed. People had to be relocated. My family, we lived in a small Lutheran church for about 3 weeks, and then down on Swan Island where there was some housing down there from the war effort. And then we really started to bounce around. I lived in Giles Lake in northwest Portland for about almost a year in trailers. Everybody should know about it, not just young people. All the old people that are still around should know about it, because I think that this is what it should be about. And it was a place where people could, the returning GIs could get a good education. And it is significant. It's significant to this state. It's significant to the history of this state. It's significant to the history of this city.
It is significant, absolutely, and we appreciate him opening up to us like that. We have more on that story at kgw.com. We're going to finish the story coming up next. Finally tonight, another installment of Show Us Your Weird Holiday Decor. This will get weird as we get closer. Brenna sent this in. She wrote, "My dad loves Godzilla more than anything. So for many Christmases, my mom and I have bought Godzilla ornaments for him. And yes, what we're zooming in on is a cross stitch that reads, 'May Godzilla destroy this home last.'" It's beautiful. Keep the weird holiday decor coming. We love how much everyone at home has taken to this. Send them to the story at kgw.com or follow us on Twitter and use that hashtag #ThisStoryKGW. It's so perfect. That does it for this show. The news at 6:30 with Laurel Porter is coming up next.